Good evening, Spoken Grief family. Today we're going to be joined by Khalida. I got myself a cuppa. Don't know what you guys have got, but make sure you grab yourself a drink for this Friday evening where we'll be talking all things related to milestones, but one milestone in particular, that being the wedding day without our mums. So if you have any questions about milestones or anything like that, do drop your questions in the comments.
Lovely.
Hi Khalida, how are you? Let's crack into our conversation this evening.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself and let's tell them how we know each other as well.
Yeah. Okay. So to everyone, hi everyone. My name's Khalida. Me and you, Shuma, we both came across each other at uni. I think it was first or second year. I'm not even sure, through a mutual friend. And I guess that's where I wouldn't say where we were close, but I feel like after obviously the loss of your mum, unfortunately, it was a ground where we were able to find like a mutual ground where we could both kind of understand each other and what we were going through.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like unfortunately grief was one thing that probably gave us something mutually to connect with.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's why I felt that we kind of connected a little bit, but I'm glad that I had someone that I knew can relate quite easily. So tell us about like your grief journey, who you've lost, and how old you were when you lost them as well.
So with myself, I feel like I'm an OG with losing people. It sounds really horrible, but I lost my mum when I was around 13 years old. My mum passed away from liver cancer. Obviously I was really young at that time, and I guess the process of grief at that point in my life was quite different to the fact that I recently just lost my dad just before lockdown. He had pneumonia, not COVID, but yeah, it was a horrible time, but I've actually lost both my parents.
And obviously my love goes to you.
Thank you.
Even though I've lost someone, you know, I find it so difficult.
Yeah.
I'm on this page, and even though I've lost someone, I still get stuck for words as to what to say to comfort others that have. But you know, my prayers and my love always with you and your parents as well. So this evening we're going to be talking about milestones without our mum, and in the future I'm hoping to do a part 2 with you so we can talk about your lovely dad as well. So the milestone that we're focusing on today is getting married, marriage without our mums, and I think we're going to have to touch on the most obvious thing here is the fact that we're both Asian, of Bangladeshi origin, Muslim as well, and that plays into our identity and the general processes of us getting married and how important and significant it is for many of us out there, regardless of ethnicity, with as to the role that mothers play in that process. So I got married almost 3 years ago. My anniversary is coming up next week. And you got married what year?
2018, so 2 years ago.
So literally a year after me. So kind of embarked that journey around the same time in our lives. How did you find that process initially of wanting to get married, and then when you found the person that you wanted to get married, actually carrying out that ceremony without that important person?
I feel like for me it was quite a challenging process in the sense where I thought after losing mum, I went through that whole process of being lost. I couldn't find myself. Like I felt, even though I come from a family with loads of siblings, loads of sisters, I had the guidance, but I just couldn't find myself and my place. And I felt like marriage was on the cards. I was like, I just need somebody. I need my family. I need like my own thing. I guess around the age of 23, which is quite young, but my sisters were like all getting married around me, and like everyone was slowly leaving home, and it came to a point where I was like, do you know what, I want to get married. I feel like that is gonna not heal me, but give me a sense of closure where I can start kind of making my own pathway, because I felt like I was forever following footsteps of my mum, which I couldn't kind of fulfill. I don't know how to explain it in that manner, but I just felt like being married would make me feel better.
I think, I think I understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, like as in I felt like it would just not completely cover that void that was left by her, but I felt like it would give me a new direction and almost kind of distract me, I guess, which sounds a bit bizarre, but I guess those that have lost someone would probably understand in that way. Yeah, and then I ended up, I was quite positive. I didn't really feel like getting married would impact me with the fact that my mum wasn't around until I was undergoing the actual processes of getting married. So obviously with the Asian community and the Asian culture in general, there's so many ceremonies, so many things that mothers in general love, and you can feel that motherly touch when, like, for example, like the care packages, the gifts and stuff, like there's like cultural foods that would be made to give to like the groom's side. And it was like these little things that I feel like as time developed, like through like the process of getting married, it highlighted a lot of things that I was missing. Like my mom wasn't there to make those foods. So obviously like my mother-in-law, she's the sweetest thing ever. But obviously like when she gave me my kind of gifts, there was like loads of these handmade stuff. Like my sisters were like, oh my God, like I haven't had this in years since mum last made it. And it made me feel a bit like, oh, like we can't give that back because we don't know how to make it. We don't know how to do these things.
This is also familiar, honestly.
Yeah, and it's like, bless my sisters in general and my brothers, like they're angels in the sense where they did their most to kind of fill that void of like giving loads of stuff that was close enough to what my mother would give. But at the same time, it wasn't it. There was always like that motherly touch was missing, and that was just like the processes of exchanging gifts. Like the actual wedding day itself was like a whole different ball game, and then the process after being married, it was like
another ball game.
Yeah, a whole different other ball game.
Yeah, it's so. I love the fact that I don't love the fact. I actually hate the fact that I can completely understand everything you're saying right now. With me, when I decided that I wanted to get married, it was almost, you said for you it was trying to find that new direction.
Yeah.
For me, very early on in my grief journey, I was blocking things out a lot, and I'd just come back from working abroad, and I was in my family home. I moved in with my dad and my little brother again, and obviously my mum passed away at home, and for me it was just like, shit, I can't even sit in the living room without looking in that corner when he passed away. And I needed just something to, I wouldn't say it was a new direction like you, I just needed something else to just keep busy with. And I thought, okay, I need to get married. And then looking for someone was an interesting process, particularly for us. Like the mother is heavily involved in the whole process. Like the mum of the potential groom and the bride, they will talk and, you know, build that rapport. And the rapport that they build early on is the rapport that carries through after marriage as well. And that was completely missing for me. And I definitely think the whole gift idea was something that till this day, like, I will be so thankful for my sisters. I'm blessed to have 3 sisters that really, anytime that our in-laws, like anytime like my other sisters in-laws come around, or my in-laws are involved in, I don't know, prior to lockdown, obviously, coming around and chilling, my sisters will be there. My dad literally rolls his sleeves up, he's ready to cook. He tries to fill that void. But it's questionable because as much as everyone tries to fill that void, it never matches up to what it should be.
Completely agree.
And like where I've got like sister-in-laws who like, so my husband has 2 brothers who are both married, and both sister-in-laws are fortunate to still have their mums here with them today. So they're the aunties, we call them. You know, when they come around and they chill with my mother-in-law, I just feel really
like you're missing out as well.
I just feel like I can't form that bond. I will never know what it will be like for my mother-in-law to be sitting in the same room as my mum. And where I see like the tight knit between like my sister-in-law's mums and then my mother-in-law as well, it's like it's just so different. It's so weird. It honestly is. It makes me sad. And I feel like thinking about now, like being married, yes, we got married without our mums. We'll talk about the big day later on. But like married life without mums in a Bangladeshi household.
Yeah.
It's I can't even describe it. Like,
it's just so, like, I completely understand, and I personally go through that. Like, in the where I'm currently staying, like, obviously my in-laws, there's like, their community is quite tight, like, as in the neighbors are very like neighborly, and they're really like, they always come over, and you'll see like their daughter-in-laws, and then they're like, kind of, they get along with, like, as in, you know how you were saying, like, you'll see your sister-in-law's mothers, and you know, they communicate, and they've got that like nice bond. I definitely agree, because I go through the same thing. Like, whenever like these neighbors come over, or they're like my mother-in-law's friends and stuff, it's always that passing comment of like, oh, have you got your mum? Or like, where's your mum? Like, without even knowing. And then it's like, I get stuck in this position, like, oh, what do I say? Like, oh no, she passed away. And then it's this whole sympathy trail of like, oh, don't worry, you know, you'll be all right. Like, whatever. Like, it's just, I feel like that's such a common thing. Like, you'd feel like that, anyone would feel like that if they didn't have their mother to kind of support them. It's not even support, it's like they almost speak as part of your character.
yeah.
And you have no one to vocalize what an amazing person you are, but like, I'm sure your mum would have done. So like, in that sense, like, when you have your sister-in-laws, like, I'm sure they'll praise them, and you know, they do all of that stuff which you miss out on, I guess. And it does make you feel sad, because you just think, oh well, you know, I'm still here.
Yeah, I mean, it just got me thinking, like, has there been any moments in time within your in-laws where like your mother-in-law tries to like address your mum and the absence of her mum? Because I think for my mother-in-law, there's been a few times where, out of the goodness of her heart, she would say something like, you know, if your mum was here, then she would be joining in with us. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I've had a lot of encounters in that sense. Like, like I said, my mother-in-law is like, she reminds me of my own mum, which is really nice. But at the same time, yeah, she has done that quite a few times, but it's not like in a malicious way or anything like that. It's definitely like the way you said, like, you know, oh, if your mum would have, like, for example, like Eid and celebrations like that, like, oh, your mum would have, you know, come to the garden. Even summers, like, she would have come and sat and had tea with me. She would have like loved going to shop with her. And now it's like with my dad as well, like, it's a whole new ball game, because my dad used to come over and kind of fill my mum's void. But now it's like literally yesterday, those kind of past comments of, if your dad was here. And it's just, it makes you feel sad inside, because you think like, well, they're not here. Like, it reminds you of reality, because I guess people that have lost someone, you almost fall into this like mindset, like they're still around as long as you just don't mention them. Like, yeah. But then the moment someone says like, oh, if your mum was here, it's like, oh crap, she's not here, or oh crap, he's not here. Yeah. And then it kind of puts you, like, takes you back to think like, there's nothing you can do about it, you know, and you have to move on. Like, and it does make you sad, because you think like, oh,
yeah. Like, I think it's particularly hard with people that never knew them beforehand. Yeah. So typically, like our in-laws, they never got to meet our mum, and then anyone to do with our in-law side. So I randomly, like a few months ago, had one of my husband's cousins like doing the dishes, and she was just like, she mentioned something about, oh, how's your mum? She goes, how's your mum and dad doing? Oh, I mean, your dad.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's that, and I was just like, yeah, it's fine. But like, it doesn't, I don't hold it like with a grudge or anything against them, but it's like, fuck, you've just reminded me that no, I don't have my mum isn't here.
Yeah.
But do you think, like, this is a question we were talking, this is something we were talking about like privately on WhatsApp once, and I wonder what other people would have to say about this.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Do you think it's possible to grieve someone that you've never met? So, for example, do you think it's possible for like our husbands who've not met our mum to grieve for our mums?
So this really, like, I remember I was literally coming back from my dad's cemetery, and I was speaking to you about this, and funny enough, I came home and I asked my husband that question, because it really intrigued me to think. I personally feel like you can't, like, you can feel sad and you can feel that empathy for that person, but I feel like a it's hard to grieve for someone that you haven't met, because you don't have that emotional connection. You haven't got that bond. You didn't build that bond. And I feel like, personally, like, this is me, I don't feel like I could grieve for someone that I've never met, because it's very hard for me to get that emotional attachment. Like, you hear those like local news about a boy got stabbed and he passed away, or this person passed away, and you feel sad, you get taken back, like, oh my god, that's horrible. Like, imagine what their family is going through, imagine like how their mom and dad must feel. But then after a couple of hours, you're fine. Like, so I feel like, I don't know, I feel like grieving has to be more than 10 minutes or more than a couple of hours. Like, it's something that sticks with you. And I feel like there's a fine line between grieving and feeling sorry for someone. Like, I don't know, like, feeling their pain. Like, you can't put yourself in that position to have what I'm trying to say is, emotionally, I don't feel like you can connect with someone to feel that grief if you haven't met them.
It's interesting.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's kind of like made me think about what I think, and it's kind of rumbled me a little bit, because you mentioned things like, in an article, if someone passes away, you feel sad, and a couple of days or a couple of hours later you've forgotten, but grief sticks with you. And if you truly grieve for someone, then it will definitely hang around day in, day out. It doesn't leave you. So when I think about some of the celebrities that have passed away in the last year, 2020, man, it's been a rough year, like, so many people passing, but I did feel sad. I'll admit, like, I felt sad and I felt like I was grieving, because the emotions are very similar to grief. But then I can't put my hand up and say I grieved for those people like a week later, like I do with my mum. So I think, like, we definitely mourn these people, but grief is completely different. Like, I know that they kind of entwine, but yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I actually asked my husband the same question, although I don't remember what he answered to it, because he said, do you know what, I don't want to say anything in case I get it wrong, but I'll definitely add it into the caption when I upload this on my channel. But it's an interesting one for sure, and I wonder if anyone else has anything to comment on that, because I think I would definitely feel the lack of emotional attachment to someone that I've not met. Like, say for example, my grandparents both passed away on my dad's side. I've met them, right, but I never grew up with them, typically because they don't live in England, right? They live in Bangladesh. And when they passed away, I felt sad. But did I grieve? It's questionable, because I didn't have that relationship. I didn't have that relationship with my grandparents, but I grieved for the sake of my dad and having lost his mother and father. So it makes me compare that real life situation to what we're talking about with the in-laws. Like, my husband never met my mum. I don't know, like, does he grieve or does he mourn her? Like, what is it that he feels? And the reason why I asked you this question initially, when we were talking about it months ago, is to do with, to what extent can our partners support us whilst being married to them in such a situation? Is it possible for them to fully support us if technically they can't grieve the person that we're grieving because they never met them?
Yes, so following on from, like, as in someone grieve for someone they met, like, that's almost answered it, in the sense that, like, for example, my husband was pregnant for my dad's death, whereas he never met my mum, and the way he's grieved for my dad is different to the way that when I, like, the emotion clearly shows that it plays a part in the way that people mourns in general. Like, I don't feel like they can fully support you in grieving for someone if they haven't met them, purely because of my own personal experience. Like, my husband is amazing in the sense where, communication wise, we can talk about stuff, and, you know, he'll try his hardest to make me feel okay, but I don't know, I just feel like I've never had that emotional support growing up in general. And I think maybe it might be because of the way I am, that I generally tend to shy away from the way I feel. But I think even if I was to kind of fully say how I feel, there's only so much someone could do to make you feel okay.
Yeah.
If they haven't met them, like at least there's I don't know, if he had met her and he had spent time with her, maybe there would have been a mutual ground where he could understand the things I miss or the things that I crave for. I don't know, like there'd be some ground where he could kind of build upon with support, but there's nothing there. He just goes off by stories that my dad's told him or I've told him.
And you have to rate them for that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being in those shoes, and I know that I'm difficult because of the fact that I don't have a mum, and I can't make sense of the world without my mum. And there'll be times where I'm thinking or feeling something and he's not going to get it because, you know, he didn't know her, or there might be a trigger and he might just not get it because he wasn't around when she was around. But you have to give them credit for the empathy that they are able to show. Like, supporting us is hard, and I think definitely this is a conversation I feel like I need to start up a little bit more. I'm really curious to see, like, whether it's a controversial thing, and, you know, some people think that you don't have to meet someone in order to grieve for someone. I mean, is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation?
We were talking, I don't know whether you want to touch upon it, but on that conversation that we were talking about a couple of months ago, we were talking about, like, your relationship with your mother-in-law and, like, you know, calling her by that motherly kind of.
Yeah.
So obviously, for those that don't know, in our culture, you would call your mother-in-law amma, which is mum, or like you'd call her mum in general, just because it's like that emotional connection, I guess. It's a culture.
Cultural.
Yeah. Which you were actually. So I don't know if you want to say.
I'll go for it. Thank you for reminding me, because that was such an important thing, and I wonder how many other people are on the same boat as me now. So, as Khalida rightfully explained, as a Bangladeshi woman, it's typically known when you get married to call your mother-in-law mother, not mother. Who says that? Mother, amma or mum, right? And obviously, when I got married, it was 2 years after my mum had passed away. So I'd gotten married 2 years after my mum passed away, and I kept thinking, well, what am I going to call my mother-in-law? Like, I was already anticipating, what am I going to call her? What am I going to do? And like, I'd asked my sister, because my sister, she got married. Hers is a bit of a complicated situation, but she was due to get married in September of 2015, and my mum passed away in July 2015. Oh. And she carried out the ceremony, but she was able to have, like, the Islamic nikah, like, in May when mum was here. We really, like, we did a rush, like a 3-4 day prep, and we got her married and mum got to witness it. So that's, like, what she considered as her wedding. But she had to carry out that ceremony in September, literally months after mum passed away. Hats off to you, Shani, because I don't know how I would have done it. So I turned to her, because obviously she'd been married for 2 years. Obviously, she knows what the deal is, and obviously she's calling her mother-in-law something. And I don't know if she's going to hate me for this, but she just basically said, I just tried to make eye contact with my mother-in-law. And then, like, if she looks at me, then she knows that I'm talking to her, and then we communicate that way. And I'm just like, okay, men will don't take it. I'm going to have to try and do the same. And I actually did. I did. Like, I've literally just ensure that my mother-in-law knew that I was talking to her, and otherwise I'd actually avoid, like, if there's multiple women or people in the room,
don't open your mouth.
I do open my mouth. I just talk about something generic, and I wouldn't talk to her directly, but that's what I would do. And I think, even though it had been 2 years after mum had passed away, it felt so fresh. Like, I don't think I can. I say this to my husband, and I don't know whether I'd ever be able to call her amma or mum, because for me that there's only one, like, I've only got one mum, but I know others that are grieving and they are able to call their mother-in-law mum. You call your mother-in-law mum, don't you?
So for me, it's funny because your sister and you both did the same thing I tried to do for, like, the first few months. And I feel like, for me, I never really thought about it until you actually mentioned it, because I was just not, I don't know, I didn't pay attention to actually how I would refer to her, in a sense. So for me, like, when I got married, I did the whole eye contact thing because I just felt a bit awkward, like, even though she's lovely, like I was like, she's not my mum. So how am I going to call another person mum? And I ever called mum. You got married quite shortly after your mum, but it was 13 years in for me. So it's been a long time that I haven't called anyone mum. So to suddenly start calling someone mum was just like, that doesn't even sound right. Like that, I can't do that. And then I think over time, it just I just changed it to just mum, because I never called my mum anyway. So I feel like that just fitted all right for me, and it was all right for her. And I think she understood it as well. Like she understood that the situation that I was in mentally, where I was like, it didn't feel right. So I call her mum, and I feel like it's almost as if you're naming someone, because I never really had anyone to call mum. Whereas I had Amma, like I had my Amma, but she's mum. So it's like you're giving a name to somebody else. It's not really, I don't associate it with Amma in that sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I wish I was able to do that. I know for you it's been so many years since your mum passed away, so maybe it was slightly easier to attach that name to a body. But for me, I feel like I called my mum, Amma, mummy, like literally calling her all these names that I associate with her. So even if I tried to call my mother-in-law something, it's one of my mum's names. Like how could I possibly give one of my mum's names to my mother-in-law, who like, and I think because I got married 2 years after, like the relationship between my mother-in-law and I, like we have a lovely relationship in the sense that we get on. I feel comfortable around her, she feels comfortable around me, blah blah blah. But the difference between me and my sister-in-laws is they've got that extra bond. I don't know whether it's to do with calling her mum and then that relationship just slightly sweetening, or is it because I'm just an ice cold bitch that can't let my guard down?
I don't think it's that. I think maybe there is an element of the fact that you have to remember, are your sister-in-laws younger than you? Or
one's older and one's younger.
Okay, so that does make things a little different. So I just feel like, there is an element where maybe, that sweetness where, they're calling her Amma and then you're like, you, or I don't know what you call her. But like, I think end of the day, you have to remember the situation you're in. Like your sister-in-laws, God forbid, won't be in that situation anytime soon, but like they haven't experienced what you've experienced, so they can't possibly, I don't know, they have an easier way around it. You have gone through a certain amount of stuff, which, like you said, you have so many names that you associated with your mum. Lucky for me, I only called her Amma. I didn't really call her anything else. So for me, maybe that's why it was easier to just associate her with mum. But for you, you need to understand as well that you've gone through this whole process and you've got a whole different situation where you should be too hard, basically, because like they've still got that loving relationship. I think you should just take it for that. Like, it might get sweet over time, do you know? Or you might,
who knows? Who knows? But I just feel like part of me just feels really guilty for not being able to put that like guard down and be able to call her mum or Amma and then kind of not be so awkward. But I just feel like, for me personally, I don't think I'll ever get over the fact of not having my mother and her role as a mother in my life, and then I don't want anyone else to try and be that role, and I just want to cling on to mum in that way, and I just feel that part of me will be letting her go if I start calling someone else mum.
No, and
I just battle with it a lot.
Yeah, but then I think it's also about your journey in general. Like for me, I guess with my mum, I'm in this constant battle of trying to get over her sense. Like, come on now, like 10 years, 15 years now, and I feel like the only reason why I step back off my mum is now have been replaced with a whole vicious new cycle of grief I had, and that's the only reason why I feel like I'm okay to stay away, because it's okay that my dad now. So like, I don't like, I post like I like to vocalize how I used to feel on Instagram. I just send posts like all about my mom, and then now it's like it's not that my thoughts don't go that way, but I just feel like it's so focused on my dad now that I feel like I've grieved her not enough, but like to a point where I'm okay. I still feel sad, I still miss her, I still have those emotional attachments, but I feel like because of the loss of somebody else, it's almost not filled that void, but almost filled that void with a new level of grief. So I'm starting from scratch again, but with a different person. So I feel like that's probably why, like, people are at different stages, and for you, you're at a stage where it's still so raw. Like, no one can tell you, you know, you need 10 years or you need 5 years or you need a year. Like, everyone goes at their own pace, and I guess that's something that's forgotten and it's not really mentioned within the Asian community. Because, like, for example, this is just to touch upon my dad. When my dad passed away, I was at home, like I was in my in-laws' house, and almost instantaneously my mother-in-law came to my side, and I obviously was like breaking down, but her first comment was like, don't worry, this happens, like, it's part of life. It's like all these comments, and I feel like she wasn't saying it in a malicious way, but like she was saying what, like, I guess my mum would have said, or like any other person from an elder generation. Like, it happens, it's a circle of life, even though I'm fully aware of it. But she mentioned something that I almost was like, there's no relation there. Like, she commented saying, like, you know, my mom and dad passed away, but I'm okay. But the difference for me is, like, I lost my mom when I was very young, and then I lost my dad where I feel like I'm considerably still young. But you had a lifetime with them, or like enough of a lifetime where they saw you get married, they saw your children, they saw you know, they were able to witness milestones in your life, whereas I haven't. So, like, my point is that's forgotten. Like, you know, you as a person, like, that's your personal grief, and no one will understand it, unfortunately. They can sympathize with it, they can try and understand it, but no one will fully get what's going on in your head or my head or anyone else. So when I say, it's almost like I said, forgotten about, like, your history with that person, because when somebody from outside sees, they don't see that you, and you look.
I think you just hit so many nails on the head. So much of what you said. I did say earlier that we would address the absence of our mums on the actual wedding day. For me, I felt like my sister had done like a tribute at the end of her wedding day, ceremony day, and I knew I wanted to do something there. So I actually had a corner of the wedding hall just dedicated to my mum, and this lovely little table with a photo of her, a white rose, and then just lots of lovely flowers to be like the presence of my mum on that day. And because I got married in November, the weather wasn't all that, but I actually had lanterns to put up in the air as well. But it was just so windy that day, we weren't able to do it, but I really wanted to put out lanterns and just gather in a circle and do that. But we weren't able to do it. But that's what I did in terms of like paying a tribute. But the lack of presence was something that from the moment I woke up, like we said earlier, like every tiny thing before the big day, you notice that she's not there. I notice she's not there. Like, I was thinking the night before, like, who's going to wake me up and who's going to like direct me? Like, who's going to tell me like you should be more ladylike or you should do this? Like, you know, like, who's going to tell me not to smile too much? Do you know what I mean? Like, and then the day just progressed, and like I walked into the hall with my dad, and it was just so emotional. Like, before I got to the stage, one of my sisters was bawling her eyes out, and then it's just like, you look around and it's like, this is going to be the happiest day of my life, but actually, like, part of it, like, it's not complete. And then obviously you've got your family pictures, and Asians love taking their photos at weddings, and that seat, the awkward seat where dad would be on one side and you're meant to have your mother on the other side, who's to fill it? Like, my older sister, or I think it was an auntie of mine that was very like much present and helping us when my mum was really, really ill, she joined our family photos. But I think even when I look back on my big day, the photos, like, yeah, she wasn't there and I felt her absence, but then the photos make it even worse because there's always this random person that's sitting in her seat, like, Like, I don't want you in a fucking seat, but someone's got to sit there. Do you know what I mean? But...
No, I completely understand. But I don't know. For me, it was a little different because I wish I could do something much more memorable. Like, you know how you have the lanterns planned and you have that corner of the stage. For me, it wasn't the case because I was the last girl to get married. So I've got loads of sisters, and I was the last one. In a sense, I think my dad just wanted me out, like finish the wedding and get started on your family. But I felt like, I don't know about you, but I had this like immense amount of pressure that, you know, towards the end where the bride is meant to leave with her husband, like and start like making the journey to her in-laws' house. You'll see on Instagram and those videography kind of things where the bride is crying because dad's letting her go and her mum and dad are letting her go. And I felt like I had to be sad, like coming towards the end of the ceremony, like I felt like, shit, I'm not crying, or how do I squeeze these tears out? Because
oh my god,
I didn't have any like emotional release. Like I just felt like people are gonna assume like, oh, look at this girl, like she's so happy to leave, or oh, look at this girl, like she's too confident, like she's not showing any emotions. And it was all of these cultural kind of thoughts that passed my head, like what these old generation individuals say, and think. And I just remember like my dad kind of told my husband, like, you know, look after her, and he let go of his hand and my hand. And then I was like, my sisters are like, come on then, like I need to make my way down the stairs, and I'm like, there's nothing, there's no tears.
Oh god,
what shall I do? Like, and then there's a camera on me. Like I was like, this is the part that they capture, and they put all these emotional kind of music behind it to make it look so like to grasp that emotion. But I had nothing, and I thought, do you know what, best thing to look to the ground, try that.
Do you know what I did? Like I completely hear everything you're saying. Like I did shed a tear or two because there was like poems and speeches that made me a little bit emotional. But for the bidai, which is like the leaving part of the ceremony, I felt that same type of pressure, but I wasn't thinking about what the Tom, Dick and Harry were going to say, but it was more so like I'd overthought that moment of the wedding day so much that I'd completely just lost it, and I wasn't able to shed any tears. I felt like almost too like, to the extent that that moment was so overrated, and that when it was my turn, I was just like, why the fuck are people crying? Like, I know people that have still got their mums and they're bawling. Like, I don't have my mum anymore, and why the fuck can I not cry? Do you know what I did? You looked to the ground, I had a piece of tissue, and I just kept stabbing it like this, and I'm like
looking to
for
the
the
ground,
camera, literally. But it's not because, this is really difficult to explain, like, I wish I knew why I couldn't cry, but it's just one of those things. Like, I had my mum's older sister there on stage bawling, and like, I just kept looking. I was like, I wanted my mum to be there, and it would only like, yes, she's not here, but because she's not here, I can't cry, because that moment I associated with your parents being there to give you away. It just didn't add up in my head, and for that reason, I really couldn't cry, and it was just constipated tears.
It wasn't for me. It was literally like bleeding a rock. I couldn't get anything out, and then I just remembered, like, you know, thinking, oh, this is going to look really shit in the wedding video, like the trailer. It's fine. Luckily enough, they didn't even put it in. But I feel like, I don't know whether you had that same processes, but I was bawling my eyes out 2 days later when I was at home, and I had time to kind of absorb the fact that I was in my newly married life. I have a woman that I'm supposed to call mum, and like start this whole new step in life without that motherly touch and like that motherly guidance. Like, my sisters by all means are just as close as being my mum, because the advice that they give me goes above and beyond. But I feel like you don't absorb that advice. It's not absorb it, but like you don't take it as seriously, because, you know, at the end of the day, they're your sisters, they've gone through that, and who knows whether that advice is actually solid. Whereas with a mum, you don't ever like second guess it. You always like I see my sister-in-laws, and their relationship with my mother-in-law is just amazing. Like, it's so nice, like, and refreshing to see like there are still families out there that, like, mashallah, they've got such a tight bond where you know, they love each other, and like they're very close. They talk about everything to a T. And I guess it makes you feel a bit jealous, because, or not jealous, I really envy that kind of relationship, because I didn't have that time to build that. But I guess when they do get married, they will definitely feel that loss, because their mum literally is their person. And I feel like I realized that when I came here, because I was exposed to all of that. Like, I was exposed to the way that they rely on her and do all of these things, and it made me feel like, oh my God, like I started having like a panic attack, thinking, what am I going to do? Like, who am I going to ask help for? Like, if I need to go to my mom's house, how am I going to say, like, I need to go? Like, little things like that, where my mother-in-law is so open and free. She was like, whenever you feel like you want to go see your parents, or you want to go out, get a bit of fresh air, go. Don't feel like anything. Yeah, like, alhamdulillah, I'm happy to say that, and like feel so comfortable, like I feel like home. But that element of like not having my mum there to be like post-marriage advice was and is really difficult. Like, I rely upon my sisters, but like I said, it's like you don't really take everything in seriously, because the fact that they're not your mum, like, end of the day, like, they are your sisters, they're your blood, but they're not your mum. That's not where you came from. So I feel like that was a major element and a major milestone for me to overcome, like starting my new life as a married woman, and then like trying to be the best I can be, but then having no guidance, in the sense where I didn't have that mum to tell me, like, you know, you should cook things like this, or you should dress like this, or you should, you know, talk like this, or, you know, little things like that. Like, even though I'm sure we would be quite like, I'd be like, oh mum, don't like be quite rude about it. I know that I needed that, and I know I want it. But it's nice, but at the same time very saddening when you see that. Like, I see my sister-in-laws, and I just think like, oh wow, like imagine if my mom was here, what would I do? Like, she would come over and she would spend time here, or she would kind of cover that gap of like the murabi, or like the elder person standing in for you, to be like, that's my daughter.
Yeah, definitely.
Like a backup, in a sense. I don't know.
I just think so much there. You said, like, I think we could definitely do another conversation about
it.
I don't think like one session is enough to cover so many issues. Guidance thing. Like, our sisters are amazing, but they will never be able to guide us fully. They're going to go on their guts as to either one, what they were once guided by mum, and number two, what they think mum would have guided us. And then there's like all of this stuff, like with the fact that my mum's not here to sit and like that rapport isn't there with my in-laws. Like, I can see there kind of being a distance between the two families. Like, don't get me wrong, it's there, but it's not solid like the sister-in-law families and my in-laws families. It's like they're so tight-knit and they can pick up the phone and talk, blah blah blah, but where there's not that phone conversation in the evening, mother-in-law to mother, it creates such a gap. I think that affects my relationship with my mother-in-law subconsciously, and because I feel it then makes it difficult for me to not ignore it when I go forward in my communication with my mother-in-law. It's with certain things, but not everything.
Did you ever find, like, lastly, just touch upon, like, talking about, like, obviously that phone call at the end of the day, or like during the day, I had my dad to kind of fill that void, so he would always be like, you know, calling her, keeping her busy with the conversation. But I always, and now I feel it more so than ever, like, my mother-in-law doesn't expect anything. She's not the type to be like, you went somewhere, you didn't come back with anything. Like, Bengalis in general, when a daughter goes to mother's house or like parents' house, and she comes back with stuff like her mother had made, like bond kind of exchange. And I felt this pressure, like, my sister, once again, like, blessings, whatever they could to just literally fill that void. Like, my sisters would be making like cake, like try and make like different things like samosas, biryanis and stuff like that, and I sit there, why are you doing it? Because we don't, like, end of the day, can't do something like fill a void that if they're gone, like, they need to accept that you're, like, one of my sisters, I found that was a situation where it's like the mother-in-law expected, then if do not have the understanding that he has no mother. So and my sister would, bless her, like, go above beyond to just literally fill that void. So she would go and like get my dad, make stuff, and she would take it back. And we used to make it for the sake of like not kind of making it look less of a human, less daughter-in-law, which is like sad when you think about it. It really angers me, because I think there are people out there who don't empathize like with the whole situation. They just expect you at the end of the day, you're my daughter-in-law and you need to, you know, feel that. They don't really take into account these things.
I think this all really boils down to the lack of conversation around grief and not being able to openly talk about these things, where we think on one side, oh, we need to fill that void and ensure that we're still able to gift in exchange when we come back from our mum or dad's. But then because there's not that open conversation, it will never change. And I hope to God, for generations to come, I just hope that it doesn't continue this way, because at the end of the day, if the person leaves, why are you trying to fill that, like that exchange of gifts as if that person's still here? They need to understand that that person's not there. Therefore, you shouldn't have that mentality and the expectation that you're like, I'm going to roll back up my in-laws with something. Not that my in-laws expected that, but my sisters still wanted to give. They still wanted to give. They wanted to give. They wanted to give. Yeah. But it is what it is, isn't it? With one of those.
Because, like I said, I've got loads of sisters. We're all married, but situations are different with different mother-in-laws, and they're different generations. So it's interesting to see like how they process your grief or how they process your loss. It's quite interesting. I don't know whether it's the same for other people, but in this day and age, I think like that's definitely something that needs to change. And whether that's through the generations to come, like you said, I feel like that is the only way, because I don't see people changing ways like that, like especially the generation like my mother-in-law and everyone within that generation. It's very rare that you find a few that actually understand this person has no parents. Like, you tell me what you want, or you tell me what your sisters and brothers want. Like my mother, alhamdulillah, she's like that. Like, she will try and fill our void, losing our mother. Like when my dad, she didn't need to do it. She made curry, came over, and like those are little things that you really get. There are good like people that try and you feel or kind of not get over, but make that loss a little bit more at ease. But yeah, it is one of those things. I don't know. It really angers me.
And do you know what? Like, whilst we say like there's probably hope with the next generation and making change, I think we have to give the older generation a bit of like the benefit of the doubt, because that's a domino effect of how they dealt, like their parents dealt with grief.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have to be that change now, and it's honestly one of the reasons why I started this page. I thought like, yes, it's going to be an outlet for me, but at the same time, like I really want to be able to talk about grief so openly, so it's not such a taboo. And so many people are trying to do it, but are we doing it enough to the extent that it's going to reach the ears and hearts and minds of the people that need to be?
Literally that. People need to be a little bit more educated in the manner of grief work, because grief is so broad and it can be experienced in so many different ways. How can you educate enough? But I feel like there is a level where you can come to understanding of how to process things or help someone, or you know, be that kind of level of support for them. But yeah, work in progress. It's with anything.
I wasn't able to cry because the saddest thing had already happened in my life.
100% agree.
What am I walking away from?
Yeah, if anything, you're walking towards something. I felt like I'm going to do what I want to do. Like, I want to progress in life. I want to start my life. And I felt like my mum's grief was holding me back, which is bizarre to even think, but that's how that was my mindset. It's like, this is holding me back. I need to do something. Like how you said, put your mind to another focus. Like, get yourself ready for something else where you're so diverted with your attention being a wife that you're going to forget that, you know, I lost my mum. But it doesn't work like that, does it? When you get married, you deal with both of it. Both of them.
Yeah. I think one thing that I wanted to say when we were talking earlier, I just remembered, is like growing up, I thought my mother was the person, she was the person that nurtured me and shaped me and molded me to who I am today. And I'm so, so grateful to have had her unconditional love. But at the same time, where I'm now, 28 going on to 29 next year, I feel like I need her so much more. And it's really scary because I'm a grown-ass woman, like, but I need so much more of her guidance. And that's where I'm stuck at the moment with my grief. Like, yes, she was such an amazing woman. She molded this person here, but how the fuck am I going to navigate through this life?
I love the way that, because I feel like I'm looking at myself through you, like a few years ago. So I had this like this element of grief that you're currently, like the place where you're currently stuck at in terms of how do you move on, or what's the next steps you take, because you're at that age where you need that guidance, you need that motherly help, support. I was going through that when I was around 17, 18. I literally went off the rails, if you want to say, where I lost myself. Like, I didn't know what my purpose was. I didn't know, like, whether I was coming or going. I just felt like, what am I doing? And I had no one to tell me, like, you know, what is your goals, what are your ambitions, what you want to do. Like, at school, like, my dad focused on, you know, roof over. My sisters were all in education, married. And there came a point where my sisters actually drew me back down to the ground. Like, what would mum do? Like, this was the best I could get, in the sense where it's like, what would mum do if she saw you like this? Like, you have no, like, ambition, you have no, like goals or anything like that. I felt like that was a prominent time in my life. I felt like I needed mum, because I just felt like I didn't know what steps to take next. Bridge between, you know, teenaging and, you know, starting to live your own life. And I felt like that was a place in my life where I got past that through the help of my sister. I wouldn't say it was a smooth road, but it was enough to get out. But like, I feel like I'm hitting that stage again. I feel like these are the times where, for example, the fact that I lived one, that was a huge part of my life. But there is something missing. Like, I thought this child would make me whole. He does. He's like, but it didn't fill that void. Like, what will it take for me to feel whole again? Like, me.
Yeah, I do. I really do. And I also think the need for guidance it's not one that passes once you think you've got it.
Yeah.
It's a constant repetition of that. It's like, wait.
I don't think there will ever be a time where you'll be okay to live your life without them. Never.
No.
Because that's why they're your parents. They're your parents. You think that they're going to be there forever.
Yeah, and unfortunately.
Yeah.
I've loved talking to you this evening, and initially I said
lovely vent.
Yeah, I said it was going to be half an hour, but I actually think we're edging on to an hour now, and I think that indicates that we definitely need maybe a part 2 and 3, and so many other conversations to come in the future. Thank you everyone that has tuned in this evening. We really appreciate the support and love. I'm going to do a few polls and maybe post more about some of the topics that me, Khalida and I have spoken about this evening. And just, thank you so much for all your support, and hopefully you'll see from Khalida and I in the future as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.